You're listening to a 58 Ember production.
Welcome to Skytalkers. Here are your hosts, Charlotte and Caitlin.
Hello, and welcome to Skytalkers. I'm your host, Charlotte.
Hey, everyone. I'm your other host, Caitlin, and welcome to this episode where we are talking about Andor, Season 2, the first arc, episodes 1 through 3. It's here, it's out in the world, and this is our first coverage of Andor, Season 2. Really crazy.
Yeah, I feel like you're like stumbling through that because it is so crazy.
Stumbling through it because it's not out in the world because we had screeners.
We have screeners
for Andor, so it's not out in the world at the time of recording this, but it is at the time of listening to this. So yeah, that's why I was stumbling. Thank you for
calling you out.
noticing.
I feel like this whole situation in the fact that we're recording this now April 4th, so we're 18 days until this releases. Caitlin and I are on the eve, basically, of us leaving for Japan. So who knows what has changed in the Star Wars world. But what hasn't changed is, oh my God, Season 2 of Andor. And this first arc is amazing.
Yeah.
There's so much to discuss. I don't even know how we're going to be able to do it in one podcast, but we're going to do it. We're going to try and give our reactions and talk through it because I can't believe Star Wars is, I don't know, best show. I don't know. I'm going to say it. It's back. And Season 2 is just as intense and there's so much to break down.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I think just a note on the screeners, if you're listening to other Star Wars podcasts, you might hear that other podcasts have gotten like more episodes of Andor, which we did as well. But if you've been around Skytalkers, you know that our process when we get screeners is that we only watch up to what we're going to record. So we have more episodes of Andor in screeners right now, but we haven't watched them yet. So we've only watched episodes 1 through 3 for the speculation. You know we love the speculation, so there will be no spoilers for future episodes because we haven't seen them yet. Nope, we have not seen them yet. But yeah, just in case you're curious. And also, if this is your first time listening to Skytalkers, welcome to our Andor coverage. Welcome to our show. We're so excited to have you. I'm Caitlin. That's Charlotte. And we talk about Star Wars. That's what we do.
Mm-hmm. And we love Andor. We love Season 1. We talked to a lot of the cast and crew during Season 1. So if you're interested in that, you can go back and listen to our Season 1 coverage. We've talked to Nicholas Bertel. We've talked to Diego Luna, talked to Genevieve O'Reilly. And all those conversations were fantastic. And we are so excited for Season 2.
Mm-hmm.
So Caitlin, what'd you think? What'd you think of Season 2? Arc 1.
What a big question. I think this first arc did a really good job at reintroducing us to all of our characters. We know that every arc is going to take place during a 1-year period. Well, really, we saw like what I assume is kind of a couple of days in this first arc, but the next arc starting on episode 4 will be the next year in the timeline. So we started in BBY 4 here, and yeah, I thought this was great to kind of catch up with where everyone was, and there have been some updates on some characters from Season 1. The thing I thought was kind of most interesting about this arc, though, was actually how little Cassian was in it. You know, he's obviously a major player. We've got a lot going on with him in this stolen TIE Avenger, right, ship that he has. But, you know, when we get to episode 3 of this arc, he's really, you know, he's not the main character, I would say. He's not the predominant. We're not spending the most time with him. I would say we're more evenly split between our other characters, especially in episode 3. It feels like he kind of has the least amount of screen time, which I think is a really interesting choice to kind of pivot the focus more on our other characters. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's not something that I was thinking about that much just because, but I do think it's a testament to how invested during Season 1 we got into these new characters, where I feel like every time Mon Mothma was on screen, I was surprised with how enthralled I was. I just continually am surprised with how enthralled I am with her story, even though I do feel like not that much happens with her story. We're talking about money. We're talking about just a lot of conversations, a lot of walking and talking. And that's I'm not saying that's a negative. I just think that it's surprising to me how much I am invested in that and how much is at stake for her. Regardless, to your earlier point about how Cassian isn't in these episodes that much, I guess sometimes I wonder if the title of Andor is the right one for this series. I think it's fine. I do think it's fine, but I think it's so diving deep into the origin of the rebellion, right? That I'm just sort of like, okay, so I the season 2 has to prove to me why the title is Andor, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that I haven't really thought this one that far out, but I do feel like I am so invested in these different groups that will somehow form the rebellion that we see in Rogue One. Did you have strong opinions over, were you feeling like I need more Cassian? Because I wasn't feeling that way.
No, I wasn't feeling that way. I just think it's interesting that, to your point, the show is called Andor, but it was really more about what was happening to Cassian as well in this story rather than what he was doing. I mean, of course, we have the first kind of sequence of events in episode 1 where he's escaping from that testing facility in the stolen ship. Obviously, he's very much, I say in control, but he's kind of in control in that moment because that ship definitely gives him a run for his money in trying to get it out. But it's, he spends the bulk of our time with him captured by this ragtag brigade, the Maya Pei brigade in the rest of episode 1 and 2. And then he does end up escaping. But yeah, I think it's interesting. And I think it's good that, the show, like you said, it's a testament to the other characters and how strongly they're written and their storylines that it doesn't feel like we're missing Cassian Andor, our titular character, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. And just to walk back a little bit about the title of Andor, I think that's just something I've been thinking about. I'm not like married to the name needs to be different. It's just I'm just thrilled with the different perspectives that we get all across the galaxy with these basically like 6 different main characters, right? I'm just happy to see all of them again.
Yeah. I mean, the title could be different, we don't need we have so many.
That's what I'm trying to say is that we have so many
word name
and they all start with A for some reason.
A. Yes. So yeah, it wouldn't be bad if it was a different title.
No, but I am happy that we still are following Cassian. It starts with him, it ends with him. Yeah. He saves them at the end and he gets the ship in the beginning.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're kind of starting to dive in, so we should probably dive in. We are going to be talking, we're not doing like a typical 3-part episode here, but we will be going through each of the episodes individually. So it's essentially a 3-part episode.
And if you know us, we're going to get ahead of ourselves. Yeah. So that's going to happen.
Yeah. And before we start, we did just want to put out a little warning. If, of course, this is full of spoilers for all 3 episodes of Andor season 2. So if you've watched episode 3, you know that there is some pretty heavy material in there around sexual assault we will be discussing. So just a bit of a trigger warning that we will be talking about that when we get into episode 3.
Yes. Okay. So episode 1 starts with a very exciting Phyrexian gong. There's me using Phyrexian, by the way. We get a date. We get BBY4. I am not sure if I don't know the canosity of it, but I believe this might be the first time on screen we're seeing dates.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
The BBY thing was such a thing in the books, but rarely was it ever seen on screen. The way that we delineate time periods is based off of the audience knowledge of movies, right? Or, the fall of the empire, the rise of the New Republic, and things like that. And here we have BBY. It's back. So I wonder if the next arc we will have 3 BBY, because I think what we know is BBY stands for Before Battle of Yavin. I think we know that each arc is going to take place a year apart from each other. So I wonder if this will continue or if this is just like the first one that we see.
I think so. It's kind of like a ticking time clock. Yeah, I think so. And I also think that the Gorman massacre happens currently as in canon. It happens in 2 BBY, I think, BBY 2. So I think that is also a factor into it as well, kind of leading up to that event, which we know we're going to be seeing.
I think I was surprised to see that so early in that being talked about, and it's very clear that that's going to be a big catalyst in the season. I think we knew that it would be, I guess, because Tony had said some things, but I didn't realize just how big it would be. And seeing some of that come to fruition in this arc was surprising to me.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, right? Because if you're unfamiliar with the Gorman Massacre, it is a big event in Star Wars Rebels, particularly. It's shown up in other forms of canon, and I believe like it was first mentioned in the EU. Don't quote me on any of that. But we really see kind of it first explored more on screen, I believe, in Star Wars Rebels. And this is a spoiler for Star Wars Rebels if you haven't watched it. But when Mon Mothma appears in Star Wars Rebels, it's after the events of the Gorman Massacre, and it's when she publicly leaves the Senate and starts the rebellion
and blames Palpatine.
Yeah.
That's a big thing, is that she publicly blames Palpatine.
Yeah, and she talks about how she's viewed as a traitor for having these beliefs that Palpatine was in the wrong about the Gorman Massacre. And it's like when the rebellion, it's kind of like their official jumping off point, and she's officially the leader of the rebellion. So, and we see her make this speech in Star Wars Rebels. So it's a really big deal. And so it looks like that's what we're going to be seeing leading up, which I think is what we've been talking about with Mon Mothma's character, about this moment when she's no longer hiding in plain sight, right? So I think we'll be getting to that. But we're already ahead of ourselves, and I want to go back to Cassian.
Okay.
I love this opening with Cassian. We have this pilot. They're at a test facility 73, which I believe is called CNR. And Naya is the pilot that he is working with to steal this ship, which I believe is called a TIE Avenger. And I thought this conversation between the two of them, I was on the edge of my seat personally, because in Rogue One and in Andor season 1, our opening story with Cassian is him killing someone. And that I wondered the whole time through this conversation if something was going to happen to her, where Cassian felt like he needed to get rid of her, because that's what we've seen him do in these opening sequences in Rogue One and Andor season 1. And so I thought it was really important, actually, that that's not at all what ends up happening here. And they have this really meaningful conversation. And when we were talking in our recap of Andor season 1 that just came out a couple weeks ago, I mentioned that in the Andor season 1 rewatch, I was really moved by how people were inspired by Cassian, and how his words really held a lot of weight with people, that he has that charisma, that charm, that influence in a lot of ways too. And we talked about how he doesn't necessarily have a quote unquote big speech in the way that Marva has in that season, or even Luthen with the character Lonnie, but he's still moving people to action. And I thought that that's really what he gave this pilot Naya in the beginning too. And I loved what she says to him, "I've had fun here. That must sound strange." And I thought that was such a humanizing thing to hear from her, that it does sound strange, but like the Empire is built on people, just regular people in so many ways, that are just trying to survive, that are just trying to live. And if they find these pockets of joy, what does that mean in all of this? And for their morality, does it have to mean something for people like Naya, And Cassian responds, "Not at all. You're very brave." And she says, "Am I? My hands are shaking." And there's this whole thing where she says she's not supposed to look at Cassian's face. She's not supposed to be able to ID him. And Cassian basically has her take a breath and says, "You're risking everything. You can ask what you want." And she says, "If I die tonight, was it worth it?" And he responds, "This makes it worth it. This right now, being with you. The moment you step into the circle. You made this decision long ago. The Empire cannot win. You'll never feel right unless you're doing what you can to stop them. You're coming home to yourself. You become more than your fear. Let that protect you." And this, I don't know, this just feels like such a big step for Cassian, and that he's kind of thought a lot about why he's doing what he's doing.
Yeah. See, I think we talked about previously in season 1 that season 1 was the education of Cassian Andor. It's very clear that now we're starting this season with Cassian being very confident in his role in the rebellion, right? And I think that it says so much to me that this is the conversation that we're opening the show with.
Yeah.
You're coming home to yourself. You're becoming more than you fear. Let that protect you. Also, I was thinking when you were reading it, and I haven't thought this through that much, but it made me think about how, so this arc, if we view this arc as a whole, right, a one long movie if we want to, being with you right now, the moment you step into the circle, you'll never feel right unless you're doing what you can to stop them. The concept of the moment you step into the circle, it made me think about the wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And
Join my circle.
Yes, joining the circle, and then the going around Leda and her new husband while they're all circling her and joining the circle. It feels like such a sacrifice for Mon Mothma at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that she has to do. And I don't think that situation is Mon Mothma coming home to herself, but it's this thing that she has to do in order to carry on. And the fact that Leda is even getting married is because of a deal that she made for the rebellion when all is said and done.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm getting ahead, but I do think that it's so important that this conversation begins the series, begins the season and this arc. And I think that there's echoes of it throughout.
Yeah, I agree. I think I also want to bring in this quote from Tony Gilroy. You had sent me this. He did some interview not on Instagram, but you sent me the interview on Instagram. And he was talking about what...
It was with Turner Classic Movies. I'll just say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was talking about, what we can expect from this season. And it was a really short, I think the whole clip that you sent was like 60 seconds or something like that. But the thing that really stuck with me is he said that the season is about what it costs to sacrifice and what it costs to not sacrifice. And I really think we should kind of carry that with us as well, similar to how we did the education of Cassian Andor in season 1, because all of these people are giving up so much. But is there a point where it becomes too much and they can't sacrifice anymore, or they're not willing to sacrifice someone else that they love? But then what's the result of that? And how will that affect them moving forward? I think that's something to think about, when we've got Cassian with Bix and Will now. They lost Brasso, which I'm not ready to address that yet. And B2, also not ready to address that. And then, Mon Mothma.
B2's not dead.
He's not dead.
He's just forgotten behind.
That's somehow worse. You said that just so easily.
I know. And the moment the words were like spilling out of my mouth, and I was like, oh, this is just as bad.
This is just as bad. Yeah. And Mon Mothma, she'll be leaving Chandrila and the Senate and Perrin and Leda, I don't know, to join the rebellion. There's so much that these people are going to be sacrificing. And we talked about this in our season 1 recap too, of is there anyone who will actually leave the cause and what it costs to not sacrifice? What does that do for their conscience to leave this noble pursuit that they're going after of freedom? Freedom is a noble pursuit. And what will it cost them to actually say no to that? Will they say no? I don't know.
Who did you think of when you're saying that?
Well, at the time in season 1, when we were rewatching it, I was thinking about Vel. I think
Me too.
She was the question mark, and I think she's still experiencing a lot of doubt. And she has that great shot at the end of episode 3 where she's sitting outside the party thinking about Cinta, who she saw, but of course can't actually talk to or be with right now. And she is clearly upset about what's happening with Leda. She doesn't want this for Leda. I don't know. I still think she could be a candidate to step away.
I agree with you. That's who I was thinking about too when you were talking about that.
Yeah.
And it feels like that was something that really came through to me during our season 1 rewatch. And it was very clear in this arc to me that we were supposed to clue into Vel sort of doubting literally everything around her.
Yeah.
Her relationship to the rebellion, her relationship to Luthen. She has a very contentious relationship with Clea, which surprised me.
Okay. No, but they had that little tiff in...
They did, but I don't know why. I just didn't really take it that seriously.
I mean, I'm not going to say that it was a little charged
I think it was.
I would ship it too. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Because when Clea says we're just two single
Two
women,
gals. Yeah.
two single women looking at our prospects, and Vel just looks her up and down, and then it's clearly with a disdain, but there's a thin line between love and hate, and just walks away. And I was like, okay, all right. I mean, at that point, we didn't know where Cinta was, and I'm still very much here for Vel and Cinta, but
I know.
Anyway, just have to get that
She's
out.
doubting a lot. Okay.
She's doubting a lot.
She's going through a lot.
Yeah. Cassian tells Naya, though, the pilot, that he says, I'll see you along the road, which this line, you're talking about, bringing someone into the circle and then that being paralleled with the circle of the marriage with Leda and Stecken, her new husband. And this line, I'll see you along the road, is repeated by the officer who sexually assaults Bix when he tells Bix, I'll see you along the road. And that
chilling.
Yeah, that really kind of shook me. And I fully think that's intentional. And
absolutely,
when Cassian says it to Naya, it's this, we're in this together, we're on the same path now. We're fighting against the Empire. We're fighting back against our own fear. And of course, in the situation with Bix, it's a threat. It's a promise of a horrible thing that's going to happen to her. And yeah, it's just that I didn't notice that the first time watching this arc. I only noticed it on the second watch through, and just, like you said, chilling.
Yeah. Let's move on a little bit, because the moment Cassian is able to get into that tie, and then there's a beat, and then he completely backs it into the wall and screws up and doesn't know how to drive it. I mean, that scene just plays so well. I think that Star Wars has done a really good job of showing that ties, or tie anything, are really tough to fly. We saw that in The Force Awakens, and I thought that was really good when Poe's like, whoa, this thing really moves. And you're really like, oh yeah, this is kind of a different type of ship than like the Millennium Falcon or a Jedi Starfighter or anything. And just the very fact that Cassian actually have no idea how to pilot this, to me, I was like, oh, this is actually a quality Imperial weapon then, because it only takes a specific sect of people who know how to pilot this. So it can't be stolen properly. I mean, it is, obviously, but that's the guard against it.
Yeah. And when Cassian finally catches up with, is able to talk to Clea, he points out, this wasn't the ship I was trained to fly.
Yeah, and I think he's just super perturbed about the whole thing, because then eventually that's the conceit in which he isn't able to get out of his containment with the Maya Pei Brigade. So interesting.
Yeah, the Maya Pei Brigade, this whole sequence was pretty funny. I'm not gonna lie. It was obviously very serious, but it was pretty funny.
Was it very serious?
I mean,
the entire time
was when they start killing each other.
Yeah. I mean, I think the moment he gets there and you realize that it's this ragtag group of mainly guys who are really young and are starving, I feel like there was a little bit of a Lord of the Flies situation happening.
Yeah.
And I had texted you during this, and I was sort of like, I don't know what to think about this whole thing. That whole sequence had me scratching my head a ton until obviously we get to the end of episode 2. And then I recognize that this is on Yavin 4.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that whole thing and showing the dynamics, I guess, with this one group opens up a lot of questions, and I think we should talk through them. So first, Cassian gets there and he's supposed to meet someone named Porco. Porco's dead. Porco's gone. Porco as a contact is not a good contact, I guess. And I don't know, is that fair for me to say?
I don't know if he wasn't a good contact. He just got caught unaware, and
yeah,
he probably was.
True. Anyway,
Merchant Porco's name, we didn't even know him.
Sorry. There's a couple of interesting things, though, that we learn eventually throughout. I think it's in episode 1 when we find out that Cassian reveals that he was on the planet 3 days ago and those guys weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
So we're finding out things in real time based off of just joining the story as it is, in that the moment they reveal Yavin 4 and then upon rewatch, you're thinking, okay, Is Cassian bringing the ship here or something because they're building out an actual base versus all these different contacts? Like, how does this all fit into it? And why was he here 3 days ago? And the fact that these guys are also being funded by, I think Luthen in the same way, right?
Yeah, I think so. The interpretation I had was that Cassian went to Yavin 4 to meet up with Porco to talk about this whole thing of stealing the ship. So then he was going to leave and bring it back to Porco, who I guess would take either keep the ship on Yavin 4. I guess that could be a part of Luthen's plan at this point.
Yeah.
And perhaps Cassian doesn't even know that he thinks Porco is going to take the ship somewhere else. But in reality, it's going to stay on Yavin 4. I think that's a possibility. But yeah, I don't know. I think we have to pause here on Porco and talk about Porco Rosie, the Studio Ghibli film.
Mhm.
Is this a connection?
Potentially.
I think Porco is a pig who fights fascists.
Yeah. I think it's definitely
I think it has to
connection.
be.
In the same way, the names are so obvious, especially in this series. Like we have Davo really sticks out to me as such an obvious name. He's a moneymonger. Davos is a Swiss town in which has a financial summit every year that billionaires gather at. Like all these things are all tied together. And yeah, I think that's probably aligned. At least I don't know if that's on Tony's mind, but someone slipped that in there for a reason.
Yeah, I think so. I actually just watched Porco Rosie for the first time. And so hearing this in Andor, I was like, wait a second. Like the pig? Like the pilot
just
pig?
like the pig. But then also like Porkins.
I know. I also thought of that too. The first time I heard it, I thought, did he say Porkins? And then no, he says it a couple more times. Different
pork-based name.
Different.
That's a rebel ally. That's hilarious.
Yeah. I loved Cassian's line though at the end at one point when he's with these kids where he goes, so who's really in charge here? It's so not clear. The first time I watched this through, I was kind of like, I don't know. I felt that maybe this whole sequence was kind of dragging a bit. It just felt
Agreed.
like we were with these kids for so long. Cassian's literally chained up, sitting around for a good part of it. He ends up telling the group that he's with what to do. It's almost dark.
Yeah, and it's like we understand as the audience, okay, they don't know what they're doing. Cassian does. When are we going to get to the next part?
Yeah, but I think I kind of thought this portion would end when they found out that they've been supplied by the rebellion before, when Cassian makes that connection. Because to me, I'm like, okay, that's kind of the point here, is that we have all these disparate parts and they are obviously not in communication with each other, these rebel cells. If we can even call the Maya Pei Brigade a rebel cell, maybe we can. We do know that they sustained heavy losses recently. They talk about like 6 ships were gone or something like that. So they had more people at one point. We don't know what they were doing, but we have these rebel cells, and we know from the show Rebels that people are operating kind of independently of each other. And the whole point of Rebels is that eventually they all come together. And like we were talking about with Mon Mothma and the Gorman Massacre, they come together to form the rebellion. So to me, this was kind of the point of this time with Cassian, was to show it in Andor that we have miscommunication, and it's going to be causing more problems than it's ultimately worth to keep all these cells isolated from each other. But I do think that maybe we could have told that a little quicker, or gotten Cassian back to the other planet faster, or done something else with him in the interim.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Do you think we're going to see them again?
No, I don't think so. Unless they're still on Yavin 4 and we get back there.
I think that I think that's what's going to happen, is eventually we're going to get to Yavin 4, I think. Okay, I have no idea, but I do feel like since Yavin 4 and the base in which we meet Mon Mothma is in Rogue One on Yavin 4, I do feel like probably in the last arc we'll get to Yavin 4. And then maybe we'll see some of these guys here.
Some of these guys.
And it'll be 4 years later, and they're going to be in different outfits, and maybe they got it all figured out and they're more together or something. Or
they all killed each other.
Or that. I don't know. I'm trying to think that there is a storyline in which they become even more problematic for the building of Yavin, but maybe that would just happen sort of off screen in a conversation, in the same way that the whole Anton Krieger thing happened in season 1, where we never really even met Anton Krieger, and that was just a problem that was solved. So let's talk a little bit about the grassy planet that we see Bix, Brazo, and Will and B2, and I guess Cassian living on. I loved this little house.
Me too. When we first saw it, my first thought was, how can I Airbnb this?
Totally.
How can I go
How
here?
amazing would it be to live in that Airbnb?
It would be really nice.
For a night.
I think it'd be nice.
I think so too.
Yeah. I really want to go there. They have the little painting of Marva in the front of the house. Just, I guess she's really gone.
Yeah. Guess so.
Guess we can put that theory to rest.
Can we?
I think so. It's been a year.
You're right.
Yeah, I think we have to let it go.
All right, we're letting it go.
Yeah. But we open on this Airbnb with actually quite a scary scene, which is Bix is having a nightmare, and it's the officer who tortured her in season 1 who's there at the house, and he's pulling the blankets off of her. She wakes up very scared, and B2 is there saying, Cassian will want to know about this. And Brasso with his girlfriend Talia, who's also staying there, they reassure her that everything is going to be all right. And Will was sleeping outside. I'm really excited that Will is in this season and is appearing to have a much more active role. I thought his role in season 1 at the end in Rick's Road, everything that happened with his father, I was really glad that he ended up, with us in season 2. I think his character, I think I had mentioned in our season 1 reviews that I think his character could be an interesting foil to Leda in some ways. I think he's older than Leda, but as two pretty young people and what their circumstances, the past that their circumstances have kind of taken them down.
Actually, that's such an interesting thought, given the fact that he has basically a star-crossed lover now in this arc.
Yeah.
And Leda's marriage is a marriage of convenience is not the word that I would use, but arrangement, right? And I think from this episode, in the first episode, when she ends up having the first argument with her betrothed, and Mothma has to
comfort her,
to comfort her. And it's clear that he is an immature young boy. I swear they cast someone who could not look younger. It's like that boy's face, he could be like 18, I don't know, but he looks like he's 12.
Which is getting older. They all look so young.
But I think that they did a really good job casting him, because even if he is older or something, I think that he just looks so young, where you have one look at him and you're like, you
shouldn't be handed a knife.
Yeah, seriously. That you could do with it what you may, or whatever he says.
That was a surprising line.
Yeah, absolutely. Regardless, I think that's a really good call out, though, about an interesting foil for Leda. Yeah. Even if it's not super explicit, it's interesting to talk about them in conversation.
Yeah, I think so. Especially because, when we joke about Stecken and saying you shouldn't be handed a knife, you're so young. But you look at what happened to Will and his dad, who I think his name was Pack, in season 1, and what he has to go through with his father being tortured and killed, and then the riot on Rick's Road, escaping his planet. He shouldn't have to be doing that either. Even if he's like a couple years older than them, or however old he's supposed to be, it's clear he's young. But I we have our crew, our Ferrex crew here on, I can't remember the name of this planet. But it's Mineral, yeah, something like that. But they're undocumented workers here on the planet, and that becomes a problem because the Imperials are doing a census survey, I think is how it's described, and so they're checking documentation of people on the planet. And I was glad to see the relationships that our characters had built with other people on the planet. And I think this goes back to what Tony was saying about how there's nothing cynical about the show, and how the people on this planet who are I guess are either like were born there or became legal citizens like Talia did, that they're all trying to look out for Bix and Brasso and Will. I think it's Will's girlfriend's dad is the one who is like talking to Brasso through all of this and like trying to find out where the Imperials are going, and things like that.
And then he ultimately betrays them, which is just so frustrating.
No, I don't know. I think that Brasso did that on
No.
purpose.
No. He's smiling.
No, Brasso gives him a look and is like, I don't want you to get in trouble for having, like, you came clean.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because
I'm not going to edit this out, by the way, because I think that this is a good moment in which I have watched that twice and I did not pick up on that.
I was thinking of that's how I interpreted it, because
I think that's a good interpretation, and that's something that Brasso would do. I just didn't think he did that.
I do think it's something Brasso would do, because he makes a point of saying to the guy, like, you've been such a savior. Like, thank you so much for all you've done. And I think that Brasso knows in that moment that he's done all he can do, and that for him to do anything more, the shop owner who's helping them, it puts him at risk. And he can't do that, because the Imperial officer says after that, like, oh, you're lucky we were here to, like, basically save you from these illegal people, you know? And that's how I interpreted it anyway. But if you're listening, you'll have to tell us what you think.
Yeah.
Did he actually betray them, or did Brasso purposely do that to help his friend? Because I think I read him as genuine. So
Okay. I agree. I did too, and that's why I was surprised
by
in the end.
the betrayal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we'll have to see what other people think. We're living in a bubble right now.
The bubble of ourselves. Okay.
Yeah. But that's all the way at episode 3. So, of course, we're jumping ahead.
This is how it goes. Also, I think just an interesting note is the dream that Bix has with the Imperial officer who assaulted her in season 1. He does that creepy thing where he looks into the mirror, and that's how we see who that is.
Yeah.
And then it's terrifying that the person who assaults her at the end of episode 3 does the same thing with the mirror. I think it's a pretty obvious piece of symbolism that the Imperial officers are so vain that they look at themselves to make sure that they're coiffed. And it's also like, oh, you can actually look yourself in the eye after all the atrocities that you commit.
Yeah.
That's what goes through my head too. And then it's also interesting in episode 3 that when that man and Bix are fighting, the mirror actually breaks.
Yeah. I think there's something too about the idea of, like, through the looking glass almost, that this nightmare, this dream world nightmare, but then that also that was already reality for Bix. And then it becomes reality again in episode 3.
It is reality.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Chandrilla a little bit. We'll come back to Mina Rao, this planet. But let's talk about Chandrilla a bit, because the design has never designed more.
So good.
It's
so good.
it was a feast for the eyes to be on Chandrilla, and it was absolutely breathtaking. Every piece of it, every component, everything. It was like the vision board was so coordinated. Everything fit together so perfectly. All of the costumes are exquisite. This, like, accordion fan motif that is in all the clothing and on the floor of everything, and even on the, what is that statue called, a Shandy mirror, something like that.
Sure.
It absolutely incredible. And I felt like we just had such a good idea of the Chandrillan culture, and even, like, walking up the mountain to get cleansed and hear some children sing.
Yeah, now that we're talking about that, I know that's in episode 2, but the moment I watched that, the first thing I thought of was, oh, is this a Star Wars Visions, The Village Bride?
Oh, yeah.
Reference. And I still think that it could be, but I don't think it's on the nose, but it's interesting. You go up a mountain to be blessed. That's basically what happens in The Village Bride too. So fun reflections of different stories.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think that I felt like this first arc with Mon Mothma was very similar to a lot of what we saw from her in season 1, where she is mostly in her family home in season 1, and it's about her having to negotiate and talk through all of these really big things that are happening with her money and, all of that with Tacoma and Davo and Luthen. A lot of that is happening in her family home and like her arguments with Leda and Perrin, and eventually Leda deciding that she wants to move forward with this marriage. And that's really like we stay in the same place with Mon Mothma in this first arc too, when in her Chandrillan estate, I guess, which it is beautiful. So I wouldn't mind also Airbnb-ing there.
No.
Yeah. Skytalkers is excited to bring this episode to you today with the support of Cozy Earth. Luxury starts where you rest, and Cozy Earth products are designed to transform your 5 to 9, the time that matters most, into the coziest sanctuary. The best part of any day is winding down and turning on your favorite Star Wars TV show or movie. Cozy Earth is here to help you create an atmosphere of luxury, comfort, and rest as you retreat to a galaxy far, far away.
We've been loving Cozy Earth's bamboo sheet set and bamboo pajamas. Their bamboo sheets and sleepwear are designed to be buttery soft, temperature regulating, help you fall asleep faster, and stay asleep longer. Caitlin and I have been living in the pajamas these days, and there's nothing like a matching pajama set to make you feel excited to start your nighttime routine.
I've also been so in love with the Cozy Earth Bubble Cuddle Blanket, which may be the softest thing I own now and has made my bed feel so luxurious and cozy. My whole family has heard nothing but me rave about this blanket for weeks now. Cozy Earth also comes with a risk-free 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty on bedding and bath products.
Luxury shouldn't be out of reach, and we are so excited to have a special code with Cozy Earth for our listeners. Use the code Skytalkers for an entire 40% off their best-selling sheets, towels, pajamas, and more. Again, that's 40% off your entire order with the code Skytalkers. And if you get a survey after purchase, please let them know you heard about Cozy Earth from us. Sanctuary awaits at Cozy Earth.
But I gotta say, I was a really big Perrin fan.
You were?
I was. Yeah,
me too.
Okay.
It's kind of surprising. I am actually obsessed with this relationship, and not in the way that I normally am obsessed with relationships. I just think that it's a fascinating look into people who have been together for a long time and who are partners in something, but there's a sort of mutual respect for each other, but then also they do different things. And I cannot get enough of the conversations that Mon and Perrin have just as a watcher, as a viewer, as an audience member. I feel like it is maybe the most complicated relationship that we've seen in Star Wars.
Yeah, I agree. And I gotta say, I was surprised that I felt like they were in a much better place than when we left them, because the last time we saw them, Mon Mothma was throwing Perrin under the bus for this made up gambling addiction that he has. And you can see how genuinely upset he is in that moment that Mon would believe something like that and that she's being lied to, and how could you say that about me? But here, I don't know, throughout these 3 episodes, they seem to have a much more cordial relationship. Like when I can't remember if it's episode 1 or 2, but when she comes into the ballroom and it's like early in the morning, they're setting up for the wedding or something like that. And Perrin has a drink in his hand and she takes it from him and drinks it herself. That just seemed very, like, obviously familial and like very casual in a way that I wasn't really expecting. And then at the end in episode 3, he's the one noticing that she's crashing out.
Yeah. Of course he is. He's been with her for, I don't know, 20 years, maybe longer, 30 years. And I don't know. Even his speech, I was like, this is a good speech.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I really liked his speech. His speech. And
it's so weird. It's weird because I think that the arc that I'm on right now with Perrin is that we get introduced to him in Andor season 1 and we hate him. We hate him. We're like, who is he? He is clearly opposite of the political spectrum of Mon Mothma. He doesn't
care about what's happening in the galaxy.
He just wants to party and he just wants to have fun. And then throughout it, you realize that, it's just a arranged marriage and he's maybe not that bad. Could be worse, I guess. I don't know.
Do you think that he was a little jealous about Pei when he's talking to Mon about it?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
I
Me
think
too.
so. Yeah, I think so. And the fact that Mon was so taken aback by that and was like, oh, we haven't done this in a while. It made me think of the Mask of Fear book, which this was a conversation in the Mask of Fear between Mon and Perrin. And it's a similar like cheating situation of.
Well, they had agreed to basically like have an open relationship because they weren't going to be with each other in that way.
Yeah.
But in the book, it had sounded like neither of them had really like done
Explored,
that in a while.
yeah.
And then they were intimate at the end of the Mask of Fear, which is where Leda comes from, I think we can presume. So, yeah. His speech at the rehearsal dinner is in episode 2, and yeah, I thought it was really great. And he says, "You simply stand still, and the galaxy will hand you fresh anxieties. I hope you can reach past this constant cloud of sadness, gaiety, pleasure, joy." I'm paraphrasing this, by the way. Gaiety, pleasure, joy, amusement. All of these are hidden beneath. You need to listen for joy. Search out these fleeting treasures, and I think that's really important for the rebellion. For all of these people that are sacrificing so much, there has to be pockets of joy in there. They have to reach past the constant cloud of sadness, because then what are you fighting for if you are drowning in the despair of it all and the fight itself? You have to have something to hold on to in that sense. And
joy is a huge part of the hero's journey too.
Yeah.
Not that I think that Andor really follows a hero's journey in a lot of ways, or like the monomyth. I think that you can probably argue either way about different archetypes in Andor. Of course you can. But I do think that joy is central to Joseph Campbell and what he writes. So I do think that there is something there around Perrin mentioning that. Putting that on a pedestal. And I have to wonder if in some way Perrin feels similarly about this arranged marriage that Mon feels.
Oh, yeah.
And then that's sort of his way of dealing with it.
And they have a conversation about it in season 1 where it's kind of the first time we see them on the same page of like, are we really going to let her do this?
Yeah. And then also the conversation that Mon has with Vel about, Mon's like, hey, surprisingly progressive around this whole thing. He's not forcing Leda to do anything. And I think that's true. We didn't get any of that in this arc, I guess, from Perrin being like, in the same way that we got very hit over our heads, I think, about how Mon feels about this relationship with Leda.
Yeah.
That it's very strained, very hard for her.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I think it's important that Mon and Luthen were both there to hear Perrin's speech. And I think it puts new perspective on his actions in season 1, where we're kind of only presented with Mon Mothma's perspective of him as someone who, is wasting money, is having dinner with these horrible people, and is only seeking amusement and gaiety and pleasure. And I still think that's bad given everything going on, and like the dinner that he plans in season 1. Mon points out that it's with the people who cut off the shipping lanes to the Gorman people. So, and that's part of what we hear in this episode too, is a reference, a callback to that. And Perrin doesn't really seem to care. But we also know that Mon relies on Perrin's personality to like build rapport with people she also needs to have rapport with, and that he's actually good at that. So part of me wonders if this avoidance that Perrin, I think, can project about the real world is also like a
coping mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there is a world where he actually knows way more of what's going on with Mon than she realizes. Anyway,
I think so too.
I'm really here for the Perrin redemption arc, and for him.
I don't think we're gonna get a Perrin redemption arc. I'm pumping the brakes. I just think that what Tony Gilroy is showing us is an extremely nuanced relationship of how someone can support Mon Mothma. And it's way more nuanced than I took it. And I know you took it for granted in the very beginning of us being introduced. And it's getting more and more complicated as we see the ways in which Perrin does support Mon Mothma, and then the ways that he doesn't too.
Because even if they come to a new understanding in their relationship, if they have reconciled, for lack of a better word, and like everything's kind of out in the open, I think the decision they would make as parents when the time comes for Mon Mothma to join the rebellion is that she will join the rebellion and he will stay with Leda.
I think so too.
So they will still have to give each other up in the end.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Fascinating. Haven't thought about that. Because I was just thinking as you were talking about the ways that this relationship, another way that this relationship is nuanced is someone as focused on the rebellion and being anti-empire and also trying to lead the Senate, I guess, in all these different ways against the empire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mon is also a traditionalist. She lives in a traditional marriage. She has Chandrillan traditionalist, right? She has this opulent palace house on Sandrilla. She's having a wedding and hosting a wedding. Not that she really wants to do that, but she's doing it, I guess, on Chandrilla. And they talk about how it's been a really long time since they've done that too, but she's keeping up appearances. And she knows the traditions too. There isn't a sense of, when I was watching even the wedding, that she would need to have, I don't know, practiced that.
Mm-hmm.
I got the sense that all those people knew exactly what to do before they even, I don't think there was a rehearsal or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so I guess, does the series end in a divorce of Perrin and Mon? And by the end of this, are we going to be sad about that?
I think so, because I think it will be a necessary divorce to keep Perrin and Leda safe.
Separate and
because
safe.
now
Yes.
Mon Mothma is, publicly the leader of the rebellion.
Yeah, and it's such a tragedy and a sacrifice for Mon that she is agreeing to what is happening to Leda. I think, what is she, 13, 14?
I think I guess she's 14. I think she was 13 last season, so she's
probably 14 now.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is clearly something that she doesn't want to happen. The speech that she gives to Leda right before they quote unquote walk down the aisle. Let's just jump to that. That's in episode 3. So Mon is telling Leda that her mother was drunk right before they opened the doors of when she got married, and she says, "I was so angry. I don't think I ever forgave her, but I could never understand why she'd done it until now." And Leda's like, "What are you doing?" Mon says, "I need to tell you what my mother never told me. Nothing on the side of that door matters. The guests, not the gifts, not the trouble that has gone into it, money, embarrassment, pressure. We can walk out there right now and tell them all to have a lovely afternoon and that it's not time for a marriage. We can put it off and it will be remembered as an act of bravery. I promise you. You do not have to go through with this." And then Leda gives that biting remark that says, "I wish you were drunk." And Mon starts to cry. And I think it's really great how she steps forward. And I just think Genevieve O'Reilly is incredible. And she takes a second to apply her veil and then goes, "You're supposed to stand behind me," which I think was so good, right?
Yeah.
And I think it really shows her dominance, I guess. But there's almost no dominance in this entire situation with Leda. Leda's not going to let her tell her own opinions. Leda wants to do this, and this is what she's going to do. And Mon, through all these different ways, has given up something in order for this to happen. She's made the sacrifice that this is now happening, and there's actually no way to stop it, unfortunately.
Well, the thing is, Mon, that's the thing. We saw how far Mon was willing to go to even kind of start the ball rolling on this marriage in season 1, and she knows what it means. But even here in this last moment, she's willing to stop it no matter what.
She's willing, but I also think that it's never going to be stopped.
Well, it was never going to be stopped because Leda wanted to do it. But
yeah, I think that even though through the conversation, though, now that I'm replaying it in my head, when she says money, embarrassment, pressure, she is also talking to herself because the reasoning why they're even there is because of the agreement that she made with Davo, right? That then gets her on the road in order to set the finances correct in order to fund the rebellion. And if she went out there and called this all off, what would have happened to, I don't know, the quote unquote foundation that was set up?
Yeah.
I think that
but isn't that what Tony was saying of it's about what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're not willing to sacrifice?
Yeah,
that would have been a whole other result. Obviously, that's not what happened. But I think it's important for us with Mon's character to know that she would have done it. that she put the option out there. And I think that this is a contrast or just a comparison point to Cassian when he makes the decision to go back to the planet in a stolen Imperial ship, knowing Imperials are there because he's worried about Bix and Brasso and Will and B2, and that he's not willing to sacrifice them in that moment.
Right.
And on second watch, I was like, that is so crazy that he just goes back there without knowing.
Yeah, he like basically crashes straight on it into that planet.
Yeah, that he doesn't know the full story of what's even going on there.
Yeah.
But back to Mon and Leda, I think this is another like very complex relationship that I think even in kind of, I guess let's say like the limited screen time between the two of them packs such a punch. I mean, when Mon goes to Leda, when she hears that they've had their first argument, Leda and Stecken, and there's that like beautifully sad scene of Leda just crying on the floor. And I think what's the same room as they have their next conversation before the wedding itself. But she says, he won't hold my hand. I keep trying and he keeps pushing me away. And you see like how young she is and how intense this whole thing is. And she's like seeking comfort from her mother who is giving it to her in this moment. But then the next day, on the actual day of the wedding, like to me, that represented, I was like, oh, this is kind of a new side to their relationship that we didn't really see in season 1. They were very much at odds with each other in season 1. So then to have them in this very vulnerable moment together, it made me think that maybe Leda would say no or would say yes to Mon's proposal in the next episode to walk away. Because they kind of draw out that moment, and we know that they had a vulnerable moment in the last episode. So maybe she's actually listening. Maybe she doesn't want to try with this kid anymore, but she says yes. And then she says, I wish you were drunk. And it's so cruel. And then it's also kind of cruel what Mon says too, if you're supposed to stand behind me.
Yeah.
And
it's the reason why that relationship hits so hard. And I bet it hits hard for men watching too, but I think if you're a woman who is a teenager who has a relationship with her mom, there is no more complicated relationship than that of a teenage girl and their mom. And I think that argument that happened between Leda and Mon, there's a lot at stake. She's getting married. She's 14. Okay. The comment that Leda makes to her about, I wish you were drunk, and then Mon crying and then saying, get behind me, that could be transplanted to any argument that you have with a teenage girl and their mom. Like, that's just how it is. And
the stakes are clearly much higher here.
The stakes are super high, but that's why it's so real. And also that's why the show's so good, because it is so weirdly relatable.
Yeah.
And I feel that way about all the characters. We're getting there. Even Dedra, even Cyril. It is so weird how you cheer for these characters and they're awful people, and you have this sense of relatability to all of them.
Yeah.
And again, I think that actually goes back to the first conversation that we have with Cassian and Naya. The whole thing where she's like, it might sound strange, but I had fun here. I think if you watch Andor, no, it doesn't sound strange that you had fun there, actually. I know that you had said like, oh, it is kind of strange. I don't think it is. I think that there's a real world in which these people are three-dimensional people. It's
like and this is the thing with Dedra and Cyril's storyline too, which we will be getting into, but the fact that in one scene Dedra is with Krennic talking about how to set up the Gormans for massacre, and then the next she's having dinner with her boyfriend's mom and meeting her for the first time. And
oh my God,
it's like, do we not say all the time, like with world events going on, how crazy it is and how we're just expected to go to work and just push forward, and how that feels impossible to do some days. And then it's like,
it's weird to apply that to Dedra being at a meeting. I agree with you fully, but Dedra being at a meeting about engineering a genocide and then also going home to meet, I guess, the potential mother-in-law. It's just these weird sides of the coins. I mean, wow. I can't even believe the show is doing that. let's talk a little bit. Let's just like shift away from Chandrila. I'm
Wait,
sure we'll
can
come back to it.
I have something else to say
Go
about
for it.
Leda since
Go for it.
I still have a lot of hope for Leda. I said this last season. I still have a lot of hope for her character. I don't know if we'll ever see it in the show Andor, but I think there's so much that could happen with her character for her to grow, either as someone who veers closer toward Mon's ideologies or further away from it. I just think it's fascinating. And Perrin, when he's talking to Stekin's father, to Davo, Stekin's father, says, Leda won't be easy. Is he tough enough? And Davo responds, not by half. He'll either learn or be led. And I think that says so much about Leda. I think we've seen how driven she is to get what she wants. And as a 14-year-old, that's obviously in her position, that's going to be a very selfish want. And in this case, it's that traditional marriage fulfilling Chandrilan customs and culture and things like that. But like, who could she be in 5 years, in 10 years, especially if more things come to light about what Mon Mothma is doing, if she feels anything about that, I don't know. But I just want to say I still have a lot of hope for her character, and I would
Same.
love to see more of her as she grows up.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I think that's the right position to have. Also, who knows what Mon was really like at 14 with Perrin?
Yeah. I mean, we think about Leia at 14, and that's when she was doing everything in the book Leia, Princess of Alderaan, like scaling a mountain to become a princess or something like that. Like really hard stuff.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's move on to where were we going next?
Dedra living with Cyril. Actually, no. We have to go back even further. Let's talk about Gorman, this secret meeting.
At the Malthine Divide.
Yeah. So this is still in episode 1. We're bouncing around. We've lost the plot, I think.
We're basically going character by character. So,
and it's fine.
Yeah.
We should that's what we should always be doing,
Right.
but I guess whatever. Okay, so in the Malthine Divide, there's this secret meeting. Krennic is there. Krennic is in season 2.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Waiting for Saw and Bale now.
Yeah. And he's gathering people to talk about the Gorman Valley and the value of Gorman to the Empire. It's a secret meeting. It really does harken back. I think the imagery, everything is very evil dictator, very Nazi Germany, very secret mountain hideout.
Yeah.
So Krennic talks about how he says the Emperor's dream of energy independence is he says that his goal is to make the Emperor's dream of energy independence a reality, and that he has frequently met with the Emperor, which I thought was an interesting inclusion. I don't know about you. And then given just the fact of Krennic's prospects in Rogue One, when he's talking to Vader, and some of his last lines, I guess, to Vader are, "You'll tell the Emperor as much," and then that's when Vader's like, don't choke on your aspirations, all that. So I guess the relationship between Krennic and the Emperor, I think, is probably something that is going to be alluded to again, and that Krennic is just so desperate for his attention. And Krennic goes on to say, the energy initiate remains the centerpiece of his agenda. Access to stable, unlimited power will transform the galactic economy and solidify imperial authority. And it turns out spiders are not the most unique thing in Gorman. And he talks about calcite, which calcite will eventually coat the reactor lenses. I think we can assume that the reactor that they're talking about is the Death Star. They don't say it, but yeah. What are your thoughts about this whole sequence? We see also this like old-timey travel video around Gorman, and the fact that the Gorman Valley is the standard of luxury and quality. They have the gorlectopods, which are spiders that basically spin silk, I guess, in webberies underground. Eventually Krennic says that underneath the gorlectopods and the webberies is where the calcite is. So thoughts?
This is a lot to watch. We clearly have historic precedents for these types of meetings happening and the things that they're talking about and doing. And I think on first watch, I was surprised to see Krennic just kind of out of the gate here in season 2 in the first episode. But it makes sense because it's going to take time for them to build these things up. And you really see all of the wheels turning here with what they're doing on Gorman, and how this is all going to come together with what the Empire wants in the end, which is the Gorman massacre. Or I wouldn't say it's even wanting the Gorman massacre. It's wanting to control the resources and willing to do whatever it takes. And so that means getting these people out of the way. And they say, well, like, relocation is too expensive. We wouldn't be able to do that, and they're not going to go.
Yeah, the moment they start drilling, it will compound. Like, the entire
It's put
planet
stress
will
on the planet core.
Yeah.
And they say there is a risk of total collapse, and they have scientists. We talked about this in our rewatch of the Zillow Beast on the Clone Wars, about the well-meaning scientist who is well-meaning, but is somehow always working with these really evil people doing really evil things. And I don't know how evil or not evil these scientists were, or how well-meaning they are, but they are the ones who were talking about, it would cause the planet to collapse. It's gouge mining, and I would be stressed to the planet core. There's almost 1 million Gormans on this planet. And we have the Ministry of Enlightenment, aka propaganda, and they start talking about, hasn't there always been something slightly arrogant about the Gormans? And they've already been seeding negative information, and how they can weaponize galactic opinion, and how they're going to use the spiders basically to caricature the Gorman people. Which, again, this is the Nazis. What we saw the Nazis do.
Exactly. I feel like this is even just calling out a certain race of people, I think, and then saying, aren't they a little arrogant?
Mm-hmm.
I think it is so on the nose of what the Nazis were doing to the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And it is what, I don't know. I feel this entire sequence gave me absolute chills.
Yeah.
And I think even just the conversation then, even from that, because those guys were just so gleeful, hated it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we know that propaganda is such a big thing in this time period. It's a big conversation in Rebels. We even have books about the Imperial propaganda, like physical books that you can buy as an audience member. And I thought it was interesting when someone says, why not just have a plague? And the conversation was, we actually gamed it out. It gets unpredictable very quickly. I don't know about you, but I thought about Blue Shadow virus and the Clone Wars, and how that was in existence during the Clone Wars as something that the Separatists were engineering on Naboo, and that would be devastating. But I do think that just even that conversation is just so frustrating and so simple to
Yeah. Well, and I think what's really smart, or just the way that they're pacing it, is that, of course, this is already happening. Like, I don't think the Gorman massacre is going to happen for a couple more years, like episode or arc 3 or 4, honestly, because they're all, it's already in process, really. Like, these are the people that are being brought into the conversation now. But I think it's Krennic and someone else. It's Dedra's boss, which I was like, oh my God, he's back.
He's back, and I don't know his name.
I wrote, it's Krennic, it's Dedra, it's her boss.
Yeah, that guy.
That guy.
Who has such a face.
He really does. He's got such a good Imperial face, unfortunately.
He really, really, really does. He looks like he's straight out of 1977 Star Wars.
Yeah. But he's talking to someone and about like how this is all going to go about, and how they're even going to basically get up and running to start something like this to basically get Palpatine's unlimited energy as quickly as possible. And the guy says that they're already planting the seeds, because we've got the Ministry of Enlightenment, who already is starting to push out this propaganda. And the Ministry of Enlightenment talks about, you just have to have it basically in the right time with the right people in the right sequence in order for it to start having an effect and to start weaponizing the galactic opinion. But then they also say that they're building a new armory in the capital city of Palmo. So they're going to have a presence there, and it's probably very conciliatory at this point, I would imagine, as much as the Imperials can be. But they're already starting to build an armory. They're probably telling the Gormans it's for some other reason, but really it's to have a base for when they start really working towards the massacre more. And once they make the decision to really go forward with that. Because Krennic even talks about how they could use synthetic calcite. They could use synthetic.
I think they are using synthetic.
Oh, they already are.
Synthetic calcite, yeah.
Okay, I
but
thought they couldn't make it. So
I think that they've exhausted all options. That was the vibe that I got. Is that there is synthetic calcite. It just doesn't work as well. They need it.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah. So anyway, they're already starting this. These are just the people that have been brought in at this point. And it's going to take some time to build the armory. It's going to take time to continue to weaponize galactic opinion against the Gormans. They have it all laid out. And then it will happen. We see a conversation between Krennic and Dedra, which worth noting that Dedra, I'm pretty sure, is the only woman in the room, which was a big part of her season as well in season 1, that she was usually the only woman in the room, or maybe there was like one other, but
she was outnumbered constantly. And then also you got a sense that there was a lot of gender discrimination throughout that entire thing.
Oh yeah. I think Tony Gilroy talks about that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's part of why you're like oddly kind of rooting for her in a lot of these situations. I thought it was interesting that Krennic says you're here at my request, considering that Dedra was not really successful, not at all successful on Ferrix or with searching for access. But Krennic knows that she has a different plan and wants to hear what it is. And she says, you need a radical insurgency that you can count on, Gorman rebels who will do the wrong thing. And I think that's what they'll end up doing.
Yeah, which I think is so calculated.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's interesting that Krennic says most people don't recover from something like Ferrix. So later in the conversation that Dedra has with her boss, he's like, this looks like a demotion, but you can run out Gorman as you please. He hasn't got time for anything but results. I also think that is such an interesting way to phrase Krennic.
Yeah.
He's so results oriented.
That Krennic, since we've talked about him having conversations with Palpatine here, but he's not having access to Palpatine by the time we get to Rogue One, that he's kind of at the top of his game right now. And I feel like we might see things devolve for him at some point. I'm not sure. Or this is a great success from the Imperial side. And then, then he falls after that within the Empire and is losing that access to Palpatine.
I'm trying to think about in the novel Catalyst where Krennic was in the what was happening with him and what was happening with Jin's father. I can't remember at this time, but I do think you're right. I think he was at the top of his game. He was gathering scientists, putting these projects on the map that were really successful. Results driven.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the most fascinating thing to me that to come out of this, especially in the conversation of Dedra and the sympathy that I think the audience can have for her, is that she doesn't want this project. And I think because we have some, I keep saying the word sympathy, but I don't even know if it's sympathy. We just sort of like watching her character, I guess, is what I can chalk it up to. Is I want to hope that it's because she sees this as something so tragic and something that doesn't need to happen. But she doesn't actually say that. I don't think she does. So we don't actually know that.
Yeah.
So she might just think that it's a really hard task.
Well, I think she just wants to focus on access still on Luthen.
Yeah.
And her boss guy is like, girl, no, it's been 2 years. And you don't really get a choice in this. Krennic already picked you. And he says, humbling, both being reminded of our place in the chain of command. And then we find out that Syril and Dedra are
living together
in an apartment with a great view. No color, but a great view.
Absolutely the starkest place ever. I mean, you can compare this to Coruscant apartments, right? Think about Padme's apartment and how unbelievably opulent and Nubian and everything that was. And what does Padme's apartment say about Padme? And then what does Dedra's apartment say about Dedra?
Yeah, I loved her trying on outfits too. And it's like the all white outfit or the all black outfit.
The black outfit. It's just so stark.
Yeah.
And also, how incredible is it when she's just like smiling at herself in the mirror?
Yeah.
It's so unsettling.
It's really unsettling. And like Syril just goes to pick up groceries and, they're cooking dinner for...
And they're having this very real conversation about how Syril has anxiety around having his mother over for dinner and how he was hoping that they could put it off again, that they could push it out. And if he went to go get groceries, maybe she wouldn't be there when he came back. And
she's still on her business trip, which I don't think he knows where she was.
He doesn't. No.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's great. I'm so glad they're together.
I can't even believe it. This was the biggest, maybe, I don't know, not the biggest revelation, but a huge revelation, I guess. We had talked so much about Cyril and Dedra in season 1 and whether or not we were quote unquote right to ship it and what was happening. I don't even know if I ship it. I just
I ship it.
I guess I ship it. Yeah. I think it's so crazy and funny. And the entire relationship that Cyril has with Dedra is like pure comedy to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, our first introduction to him in season 2, he's, back at his job and he's nearly in tears with this new recruit telling him how he like sussed out some corruption in the outer rim.
The term cabal, I think is so on the nose, I guess, for current days.
There's a future here for those who dare.
Like, oh my God. He thinks
so just serious. It's incredible. I also think the standout moment was really halfway through the dinner where Cyril excuses himself and just collapses on the bed because he's so not having a good time. Anxious.
I mean, Edie is a lot.
She's a lot.
I think this is another one of those moments of relatability where the mother-in-law who questions and judges everything is in the apartment for dinner, and Dedra's being a very good host.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the conversation that eventually happens where Cyril is absent from the table and Dedra works out a deal with Edie was the right move. And I don't know. What do we think about that?
I was like, yes, Dedra, do it, girl. Do it.
Yeah, like take control.
Yeah. And when she's like, I'm not done talking yet. And Edie's like, oh, okay. It was great. Are you ready for my crazy theory?
Yeah.
I don't know if
I'm always ready.
At my notes.
No, okay. I'm on my notes, not yours.
Okay. So they're talking about families, right? And we learned that Dedra's parents are criminals. So she was raised in the Imperial Kinderblock. But we learned that Cyril's father was an adventurer and left them. Mm-hmm. My first thought was, what if it's Luthen?
Oh my God. Wait, that would be crazy. That's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. But
there's no room for that.
There's no room for that. But I was like, that would be wild if, he's an adventurer, but really Cyril's father is, Dedra's father-in-law is Access, the person she's been looking for this whole time. I do think there's like a fascinating tension that comes out of that if she were to connect the dots. But also, I don't think that's going to happen.
But wouldn't it be crazy?
I just thought it was kind of like a crazy conspiracy theory for Cyril's father.
Sure. I've already seen people talk about how maybe Dedra is related to Cassian. There's no way.
No.
Because of the abandonment and like growing up in an Imperial block. I just think that's a red herring, to be honest.
I think so too. The only reason I even thought of Luthen was because Tony Gilroy has said that we would find out more about Luthen's past. And I'm like, oh, and here we are hearing about Cyril's past and a missing father. Anyway, it's not Star Wars if we're not wondering about parent-child lineage here. So
should we talk about Clea then?
Yes, let's talk about Clea.
Bring
other
it on,
theory.
Caitlin. Yeah.
Well, the other theory, right, we've talked a lot about Cassian and finding his sister. And I do think this theory came up in season 1. And I'm pretty sure we talked about it on the show at least once. But it's been making the rounds again. Haven't really thought about it in a long time. But if Clea is Cassian's sister, that would be kind of wild. But my theory is that if that's true, if Cassian and Clea are related, that the even wilder part would be if Clea knew all this time that she was Cassian's sister and chose not to say anything about it for the cause, to keep Cassian focused, whatever it is. Because to me, Clea seems the most on track, even more so than Luthen. She stays the course. She doesn't get swayed. She doesn't seem to get stressed in the way that Luthen does. And there's something about her that she always appears to be the one who's really holding the puppet strings of or all the spinning plates, I should say, of everything that's going on. You know, she's the one giving updates to Luthen. She's the brains of the operation in a lot of ways. And I think Luthen is too. Obviously, he's really the top dog, the big boss. But there's something about her that is just so persistent about all of this.
I have some concerns about Clea. First, I agree with you. I think it would be crazy. But I also think that there's another layer to that where it would be, since Luthen has always known so much about Cassian. The first time they met, he info dumps a lot of stuff to Cassian about Cassian, right?
Mm-hmm.
And has sort of seeded that through. He probably shared that information, or that information came from Clea. So
because
that's
whoever
interesting.
Bix would have been talking to Clea in season 1.
Yes. So I feel like there is a sense that even if Clea is not Cassian's sister, Clea might know who Cassian's sister is, right, and just won't ever give that away because she is like the box, the Pandora.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I do think that's a good point too, that she just has so much knowledge that she maybe does know something or would know something.
I also think that makes her a threat, by the way.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I think her having too much knowledge, and also I was concerned throughout this arc around, you had mentioned that she is way more level-headed and less stressed. I agree. I do think that in this arc, though, she was really stressed. She was so stressed about not being able to get a communication signal out of Chandrilla, so much so that she goes back to Coruscant, opens the shop, and connects to her board.
Mm-hmm.
And what really struck me about that is, I'm like, you just have one board, just one single one for your connections. Don't you think that's a little bit of a misstep?
My guess is she can get onto that frequency anywhere. It's just that probably has the most firewalls around it. Because
sure.
she says, like, we're out in the open here on Chandrilla.
Yeah. I agree.
I think you're on.
I guess I have some concerns about there just being one central location, the shop being
where it all is. Yeah.
Where it all is. And I think that there's something about the Rebels eventually where there's several different bases, or like 2 bases at a time, that you have a spread out group that if you're targeted in one place, you don't lose everything. And I think that there's a sense that maybe everything is in that shop.
Yeah.
Especially Clea, as we've had this conversation, is potentially the most connected.
Yeah.
I think also Luthen surprised me during my rewatch of this arc. To me, around, I didn't notice this the first time, but even his conversation with Davo about bringing in the statue, when Davo is like, he came to me with an adventure years ago. And the fact that they've been connected for a while,
mm-hmm.
Luthen is keeping these connections of these people. And Mon had no idea. She was so surprised that he even showed up to the wedding. She had no concept of him coming, and even no concept of Luthen even having a relationship with Davo, which clearly had been happening for a while. So Luthen is also ultimately extremely connected. And even like, just to spin this out even more, just to go back to Vel being so concerned that she can't even find Cinta, can't talk to Cinta, doesn't know where Cinta is, and that Luthen won't tell her anything about where Cinta is. And then it turns out that Cinta's also there too, and that isn't even information that Luthen shares with Vel.
Yeah.
So much so that it's clear that Vel and Cinta haven't been talking for, I would even guess, up to a year. I don't think that they are at all connected. I have more to say about that later, but we'll talk about that more with Mon's story when we get there in episode 3.
Yeah, I think that we're not in episode 3. We're kind of all over the place.
Yeah. I think that talking about what happens at the end of episode 3, though, that's sort of what I mean.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to think of Clea as a threat. I think that maybe that's something we should put a pin in too. Especially, we've talked about, like, does Luthen make it out of season 2? Would Clea ever be the person to have to do Luthen in because he's become a risk at some point?
Wow.
I don't know. Is there also a world where Clea is the one who leaves the Empire or leaves the rebellion?
No.
With all this knowledge that she has?
That would be, in terms of what would be the most devastating, that
would be a huge betrayal. That would be the biggest setback.
Mm-hmm.
Which, as we know, this early rebellion will experience a lot of setbacks. I don't know. I think you're right, though.
Wait, and remember they lose freaking contact with Saw Gerrera.
Mm-hmm.
So just I bring that up because obviously she is the connection point. So having no sense of that connection at all leaves them on their backs, I guess, in Rogue One. Hence Rogue One in its entirety.
Rogue One.
Hence the story of Rogue One.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we should be keeping a closer eye on Clea as well, just for what happens.
Agreed.
I do think maybe seeing her as a little bit of a threat right now might be a good way to think about her. For who? Mm-hmm. That's the thing. Is she? If she is a weapon, who is she aimed at this moment? Right now, it's the Empire, and I would like it to stay the Empire, but I mean, it could change.
Could go back to Luthen.
Yeah, it could go to Luthen. I think too. You were talking about her having this wealth of knowledge on our planet with Brasso and the dad. I think his name was like Klee or something like that. He tells Brasso, this I thought was really interesting. He asks Brasso if he knows Cassian's big boss, which to me implied that this guy knew that Cassian was involved in suspicious activity, basically. Or even rebellion activity, I would say, because he tells Brasso, he says, you should make sure he knows. Make sure Cassian's like big boss friend knows what's happening here. Someone has to know. And we hear this a couple of times too in season 1, like when Melchi and Cassian split up, Melchi says, we have to split up and make sure that people know what's happening to us. Someone has to know. And then at the end of Rogue One, is someone out there listening to us? There's this running theme of being able to tell the story of the injustices that these people are all facing and making sure their story is told the truth of what's happening and not letting people like the Ministry of Enlightenment write the history of what is happening across the galaxy in this case. And obviously this is something happening in the real world too. But Brasso says to the friend, he says, it's happening everywhere. But when Clea is talking to Cassian, she already knows that something is happening on that planet because she tells Cassian that it's crowded. So she already knows what's going on. And I thought that was really interesting that they were concerned on this planet, Mina Rao or whatever it's called, that no one knew. But Clea did already know because she is so informed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I had called Clea Pandora, and I was referring more to her box being the communications.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true, but I do think that there's a potential for her to be as like a Sybil type character with just a wealth of knowledge about the future too. Or even like a Cassandra that doubts something or like spells out the future about some like mix in the communication and then no one believes her or something.
Mm-hmm.
And Luthen doesn't believe her. I think that let's put a pin in that because I think that there's something there about Clea and like her archetype and what she could potentially be in terms of communication.
Yeah. The keeper of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And the keeper of communication. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting. I was not expecting this for our Clea combo.
No, me neither.
All right.
Okay, so where should we shift next?
I think there's some pieces about Luthen that we have glossed over a little bit here.
Okay.
You had been talking about mirrors in the beginning with Bix and her dreams and the nightmares and the Imperial officer and all of that. And I think I forgot to add this at the time, but we see Luthen looking in a mirror in the very beginning of Andor season 1 when he transforms into the shop owner, into the gallery owner. And you said, Charlotte, about like being able to look yourself in the eye, these Imperial officers, after the horrible things they do. And I think that also applies to Luthen as well, because as we know, he's willing to do horrible things.
Yeah, but he has to put on a mask in order to do it. The mask being his persona of being jovial and the shop owner, this adventurer.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Which I got to say, this statue, the Shandy Merle, one I loved hearing.
I knew you would have thoughts about this. I'm just saying. I was really waiting for this.
I don't know if I have like any good thoughts about it or anything that's like particularly noteworthy. I just loved hearing the history about it. This temple figure, it was one of 12 that were stolen 25,000 years ago, which that just really kind of, again, makes you think of how long this galaxy has been going on, by Rakatan invaders. And there are only 8 known, and only 5 are back on Chandrila. And I was thinking during this, how does Luthen have time to actually like do this statue hunting? You know what I mean? Like,
That's what I'm saying.
this is a lot. And I also put in my notes, I bet Clay is also doing this.
Yeah. Oh, there's no doubt. That's why she's there.
Yeah. I mean, stolen artifacts, the black market.
I was thinking about the Elgin marbles and everything like that.
Yeah.
Like, what does it say about this gift? Is this overly opulent? Is it sort of just rightfully historical? Should it be in a museum?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we have enough information, honestly. Like the real world of this kind of stuff, of the antiquities, like black market, and even like with museums today that have a lot of stolen goods from like the time of colonization, really from like Western countries into places like Africa and Asia and South, like all these other places that they colonized, right? The term of repatriation is when you're giving back these artifacts to the country of origin. So the Elgin marbles, the Parthenon marbles is kind of the like poster child for this.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to say Elgin marbles.
That's the thing, right?
I meant Parthenon marbles.
Yeah, the Parthenon marbles. That's the thing though about it, right? They were known as the Elgin marbles for so long, which if you're unfamiliar, the Parthenon marbles, they were the statues in the pediment of the Parthenon in Athens, Greece, and they were quite literally dynamited out of the Parthenon by an English man, Lord Elgin, at a time when Greece was occupied by the Ottoman Empire, and he was able to just kind of skedaddle with them back to England, where they've been for over 250 years. And Greece has been asking for them back for like literally centuries at this point as well, like a very long time. And Britain has maintained that they're now the cultural property of Britain. And this happens with other museums as well. The Louvre does this a lot, the Met, the Metropolitan Museum. It's a huge thing. It's a huge conversation in like antiquities and the museum world. So I do think it's interesting that like there was this return of the Shandy Merle statue, but we don't know where it is. It kind of feels like now it's in a private collection, which they talk about. There's only 8 known, which means 3 of these other ones are in private collections. There are 5 back on Chandrila. They could all be in private collections too. But I really love the idea of like statues. I think there's something about like standing sentry that is really fascinating when you have these kind of temple figures. I assume maybe all of the Shandy Merles look alike. I don't know. The aesthetic of it, I think, is an interesting one to think about standing guard, about cultural property that's missing, and the way that that's represented. And I don't really think there's more to that at this point in the story, but
I agree.
Repatriation is a topic I'm really interested in, so it was cool to hear about it.
I wonder if it has something to do with just symbolically with how we think about the Mon Mothma and her relationship with her own heritage, that now this will be in their house.
Yeah, and they're kind of like, did you ever think you'd have a Shandy Merle in your house?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the whole conversation. And she's like, no.
Yeah.
And because I don't think that she, at this point, is really up on the Chandrilan culture, right? It's not on her top of her list to honor, I don't think. And now it's this big symbol inside of her house. Also, I just need to defend myself. The only reason why it's hard for me to break saying Elgin marbles is because I was an English major that studied Keats, and there's a really famous poem, okay, about the Elgin marbles. Okay, but I am very much trying to say Parthenon marbles.
I don't even think the like official. I think in the British Museum now, I think they call them the Parthenon marbles, and I think that's a relatively recent change. But they're still in the Elgin room, so make with that what you will.
What you will.
Well, and they're Britain's cultural property, so. Anyway.
All that to be said, I do think it's just this big object of historical significance that's within the Mothma's home that is aggressive in its historical significance. So that says something towards how Mon should be thinking about her Chandrilan or Shandy heritage.
Yeah, I guess, is it Shandy heritage?
I kind of love that.
Yeah, I do too. It's kind of it sounds a little silly, the name, a Shandy Merle.
Well, a shandy is a type of drink, and that's why it's kind of jovial.
Well, I mean, that kind of goes with
Yeah.
Perrin. I really liked the design of this statue as well. I thought it was cool how you can really see the reverberations of the design on the statue with like that kind of that folded, I guess, like veil that it's wearing. The like it simulates cloth in a lot of ways, and we still kind of
Yeah,
see
super
that
cool.
repeated motif even today on Chandrila in all of their clothing.
Mhm.
But back to Luthen, kind of crazy that he found this thing that was literally stolen 25,000 years ago. But all of his conversations with Mon Mothma are very tense. He knows that things have gone south with Takolma, which there was the line from Takolma, which let me go back to it in one of their first, actually this is episode 2, where Tay is worried about the risk he's taken with Mon's foundation. And he says, quote, "The irony is that it's the rebellion that's cost me the most, soured my investments. You can see how I might feel undervalued." And you can tell how freaked out this makes Mon. She's very tense. She's always tense, but she's especially tense after her conversations with Takolma. And very much like in season 1, she's immediately having to put on a facade and pretend like everything is okay. Her daughter is getting married in this great tradition and how wonderful that is. And everything sucks right now. But her conversations with Luthen are hard conversations.
Mhm.
And she is really having to come to terms with the fact that Takolma is basically going to be blackmailing her and how she can't believe this. She's known him her whole life. This can't be him. And Luthen says, people fail. That's our curse. And it made me wonder, and this kind of goes to our Clea conversation now of, will Luthen fail us? And how will Luthen fail us? Just putting that out there too. And she says she's going to have a meeting with him the next week after the wedding to talk about a number. And Luthen says, you know the number. We'd be vulnerable forever. You need to be protected. And Mon says, I'm not sure what you're saying. And he says, how nice for you.
Yikes.
Like that was also a kind of moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're going to kill Takolma. And that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, so I think that's all very interesting.
Mhm.
Okay. But I just need to say that my reading on the scene and this conversation that Mon had throughout all these episodes with Tay was that I think what they were implying to me was that eventually Mon would have to sleep with Tay.
Oh.
And yeah, I thought that the entire time that she was going to, because of the conversation that Mon has with Perrin, this jealousy, I thought that's where we were leading.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Luthen says, you know the number, I think what came to a shock to me was this realization that, oh, it's not Mon having to sleep with him. It is to like, because he's recently divorced, right?
Yeah.
That it's all on the table there. They're like the way that Mon grabs his arm, and it's clear that Tay's like crashing out. So she has to do something.
Yeah.
So I thought that's where we were leading.
Mm-hmm.
And this realization that Luthen says, essentially, he doesn't say this outrightly, but they got to kill Tay. And then by the end of it, when you see Cinta at the wheel of Tay's little car,
I was shocked to see her.
Shocked because, as I've said many times, Cinta is a killer.
Mm-hmm.
So you see Cinta, you know it's death. It's death.
Yeah, she's like the Grim Reaper.
She is like the Grim Reaper and I think she was the Grim Reaper for Tay. And in a lot of ways, I think she was the Grim Reaper for Vel too.
Mm-hmm.
When she sees her former lover, and has this stark realization that, oh, she's still in it. Am I still in it? I don't know. Is this that? What does this mean for my future? Just to return to that Vel conversation, that's really where I was thinking that, wow, it's all coming to a head here with Cinta. Whoa.
Yeah.
And you get this ominous feeling at the end that I don't know if it's Mon who kills Tay in the end. I don't know if we're going to see that in the next episode or it's going to be something that's talked about previously. I think this all happens off scene and we're just left to our imagination probably of Cinta organizing the murder of Tay with Mon involved somehow.
I think this is it. Like, she's complicit, that
Yeah.
she allows it to happen. And there's something that Davos said to Mon Mothma in season 1 where he said, "Our position sometimes makes decisions for us," don't you think?
Mhm.
And I think that this is what's happening. She knows what's going to happen and she can't say anything about it. She can't do anything about it. And it is what it is. And I think you're right. We're not going to see any more from that storyline, but she will carry that guilt with her. It's what she
Yeah.
sacrificed. She sacrificed Take Homa.
Wow. That was powerful to me, that whole thing. And then Mon dancing. That whole dance that she does at the end, and Perrin notices that she's really going through it, and she's like drinking herself silly. It's so powerful, that ending.
Yeah, I agree. I think the last 10 minutes of episode 3 really had that energy of just holding your breath in the way
Mhm.
that the season 1 end of episode 3 did as well, with uh, everything that was happening on Ferrix and Cassian eventually leaving Ferrix with Luthen. It felt very similar, the parallel of Cassian leaving that planet now with Bix and Will, and it had,
Mhm.
to me, it had that same feeling, like the look he gives Bix at the end, the look on Bix's face, obviously different situations, but that like things will never be the same after this. I think that was a lot of what I read into Cassian's expression in season 1, where Luthen
Mhm.
was driving him off of Ferrix, and now Cassian is driving Bix and Will off of this planet, and this like what appeared like a life that they had with a community on this planet, and that they are now leaving that behind. And they've killed officers now too, as well, in the same way that Cassian had in the first arc of season 1, and how he was ultimately running from that in a lot of ways. And now they have done the same. So I think there's a parallel there worth talking about. But I think the energy of all of that going between what's happening on that planet and then what's happening on Chandrilla with Mon Mothma and the dancing and just the crashing out. It was very intense. Yeah, it was a lot.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
I love that song, though, gonna be honest. I think it's like a rearrangement of the Niamos
The DJ
song.
droid was great.
The DJ droid. How are we gonna see that in Galaxy's Edge?
I don't know, but it shouldn't. I hope it's underway.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we need to shift a little bit. We're talking about devastating things. We need to talk about the scene with Bix.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big thing for Star Wars. I think we need to acknowledge that, the fact that we have a sexual assault in Star Wars. It is, I think, heavy, obviously. And I think that there's probably going to be a lot of conversation about it. And my take on it is that I do think that we see so many different power dynamics in Star Wars for the Imperial versus the Rebel, or the big guy versus the little guy, right? And I think it was when we talk about these dynamics, like right before it was going to happen, I was like, this makes sense. I think it makes sense for the story overall that we're exploring this dynamic of an Imperial taking advantage of somebody, because that's what this is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm phrasing this right. I don't think there's a right way for me to phrase any of this, but it was obviously very hard to watch and very tough. And I think that this character of Bix has been through so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that there's, like I said, I think that this whole scene makes sense to me narratively. And I do think that there's probably a conversation that's going to emerge about the abuse that Bix has had to suffer through and how that's unfair. Like, I do think it's unfair. I think that's the story. I think the story is addressing that. And through all this, I really do hope that Bix survives.
Mm-hmm.
But I do also feel like there is so much that Andor is willing to cover in terms of how much the Empire can take from people
Mm-hmm.
on individual levels. It's not just what we like. I think that the show, we had a conversation in our season 1 recap over how I think Tony said that this is the most seriously anyone has taken Star Wars. And whether or not we agree with that and everything, I think this is the most seriously we've seen a dictatorship be taken on an individual level in Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And I think eventually this was happening in Nazi Germany, right? I do think that this is, if that's what analogy. I mean, there's a lot of different analogies for the Empire, right? We've talked about them on the show. But I do think that that's sort of what this arc is getting at, that, yeah, this was happening during that time too. So I do think that I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I agree with everything you've said. When we're talking about like this stuff happening on the Malthian Divide with Krennic and the Ministry of Enlightenment, and talking about how there's historical precedent for that, there's historical precedent for this too. Like, this was happening. You think about like the Comfort Woman from South Korea, and like there's so many other examples of this throughout history, and with the Nazis as well. It's still happening. If Andor is seeking to tell the story of tyranny and dictatorship and oppression, this would be a part of that story. And
Yes.
Even seeing it, and like that's happening at a mass scale in those types of situations, but then it's happening on an individual scale, like what we're seeing here on this planet, where these officers are going around doing these checks, and they're just walking in and demanding food for the soldiers, for the stormtroopers, and like, set aside 2 meals for us. They're not going to pay for it. They're not going to, like, they'll take over the houses for their sleeping quarters. They'll sexually assault. They'll rape women that they come across because they can. And that's the story that's being told because it's reality. And I think that that's what Andor is, as a show, is seeking to do, is to tell that story, that serious story of tyranny and everything that they're fighting against. So it was really hard to watch, and I think the scene is very intense. Just the two of them in there. There's no music. The like guttural screams from each of them. It's so intense. And I do think there'll be a lot of conversation about it when the episode comes out. And it's something that I know Charlotte and I have been sitting with for a couple of days now since we've watched it. And it does feel really big to have that in Star Wars. I'll be honest, it feels big to hear the word rape in Star Wars.
Yeah, the moment that word was used,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is really big.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels really big. And then you're just hit with the reality that this happens to so many people. So if there's a place for this story to be told and to show that, to me, it's right that it's in Andor.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I also feel like there's a sense that I am glad, in this weird way, that Bix says he tried to rape me, because part of me does wonder if the conversation then would have been not like, I don't know. I'm making this up in my head. This is something that didn't happen, because obviously she said he tried to rape me. That maybe he was just trying to fight her or something. But I'm glad that it was said. I know that sounds weird to say.
I really thought that after she said that the officer that was out there wouldn't believe her, is kind of the wrong way to phrase it, because I think even if he believed her, he was never going to like spare her, regardless of what he thought happened. But I think
we're on high alert as women, right? Around like, oh, you're not going to believe me.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, oh, I'm glad that she said that, because then that's out there in this Star Wars episode as there was an attempted rape that happened.
Yeah. So, but he never responds, because then Will arrives, and Bix actually ends up killing that other officer. So yeah, all in all, it was a very intense scene, very heavy, and
I'm so glad she hit him with that hammer.
Yeah, a couple of times.
God, that hammer was so intense.
It was brutal.
So brutal.
Yeah, the whole thing. And like when he's dragging her across the floor, like
towards the bed, I just couldn't.
It was visceral.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's visceral. But at this point, Cassian arrives back on the planet, and this is after the scene with Brasso and the friend, where you and I kind of have different interpretations. And Brasso escapes. And Cassian is shooting at the stormtroopers in his TIE Avenger. He ends up shooting one of the silos that drowns the remaining stormtroopers in the grain, the wheat, whatever it is that they're growing there. And what I thought was really horrible, right? This is when Brasso dies, is that we don't know if it was Cassian or a stormtrooper that actually ended up hitting him.
Tragic.
Yeah, and I didn't really think about that the first time I watched it. I assumed it was a stormtrooper, but then I realized you don't actually see it. So it could have been Cassian, you know? And
What it costs to sacrifice and what does it cost to not sacrifice?
yeah. And if Cassian hadn't come back, or if Will hadn't left, you play the what if game a million ways, but I am really sad about Brasso, not gonna lie.
Me too.
The whole time I was watching the first 2 episodes, I was like, where can I get me a Brasso? Because he's just so great. And
you know what happens to me personally is I'm watching this like, okay, so they're waiting for Cassian. They're going to potentially leave with Cassian. It doesn't make sense for all of them to go together. That's too many people. It's too many characters to tell the story. Who's going to be left? And I was like, it's going to be Brasso or it's going to be Will. And I think then it's like, okay, what's the more devastating thing? Unfortunately for me, it's Brasso. And I think probably Tony feels that way too, because that's why Brasso died. And I hate that.
I was not expecting it at all. I thought that it would be Will or the girlfriend, because I kind of thought that if she died, if she was hit, then it would be Will blaming himself because he left when he shouldn't have. And there was like all of that. Or even if it was Will and like him being this young guy who, he just had like a girlfriend, he just wanted to say goodbye to his girlfriend. And I was not expecting it to be Brasso at all. It really surprised me. And yeah, I was like, I already felt so attached to him and Talia, and their relationship seems so pure and good. And like, they're gonna have to find him out there. I don't know. I just heartbreaking.
What do you think is going to happen to her?
I don't know. And I'm kind of like, are we done with B2 for the season? Because we haven't even talked about
that's my actual reaction to that.
We really haven't even talked to B2. I think I said this in our season 1 recap that a lot of the times I have to just completely block B2 out of my brain because
compartmentize B2.
It's never not sad.
He is built to devastate.
He
is built to be emo.
Bolt by bolt.
Yeah.
And that has not...
Even just seeing him on his little charging pad brings a tear to my eye.
It's like when you're moving the dog's crate and the dog knows that something's happening and they're all like, B's going to be upset when he sees you moving his charger. But can we talk about him playing with the kids?
So cute.
And he was like, oh, no. And I don't know. And
so
like,
cute.
When Brasso tells him like he'll go with Talia and she knows all your friends. And I didn't notice this the first time, but there's like a little yellow triangular droid that's standing there with him.
Unfortunately, I think that all of that scene was made to make you feel comfortable around the fact that they leave B2.
Shut up.
Because you don't want to be like, oh no, this is actually a greater tragedy than Brasso dying. You have to think, okay, he's just a droid. I hate saying that, by the way.
Take that.
I'm taking it back.
You're the droid rights person on this podcast.
I am, but then we see him playing with the children and having a good time and having friends. He's going to live on that great farm. It's like a dog.
Big farm in the sky.
The big farm in the sky. I can't actually handle... I don't think... I'm actually like kind of done talking about it. I can't handle if this is the last time we see B2. Because that actually means that's the last time that Cassian we never saw them reunite. I can't handle that.
I'm literally going to cry.
Yeah, me too. And then what? He like freaking replaces B2 with K2SO. Get over, like, stop.
I know. Well, Diego Luna in some like StarWars.com promo like Q&A thing, he was asked B2 or K2SO, and he picked B2.
Damn.
Yeah, I know.
What if they're one and the same? As in L3 to Millennium Falcon vibes.
K2SO. There could
is definitely not B2.
I'm just gonna squash that theory for you right now.
Okay, I'm like, here's how B2 survives.
He becomes B2SO. I'm sorry, no.
Okay,
Watch that happen and I will eat my words. But like, wow, that would be a big
I know.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that it makes me sad that they had to leave B2 and Brasso. And, like,
And their little photo of
I
Marva.
know. And like Will,
Painting of Marva?
it looks kind of painterly.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah. Will's girlfriend is there and Talia and B2. And yeah, it just that community that they had there of like friends and family and romantic relationships, and it felt so real and important and big, and then just like that it was all gone, and it's very sad. The story there was very intense as well.
Yeah.
And again, like people being rounded up, we're seeing that in real time as well,
Mm-hmm.
it
I don't know if we spent enough time talking about the fact that they really do call out Brazo, Bix, and Will as quote unquote illegals.
mhm.
I don't think that's a term that I've heard. I'm sure it has been in maybe Rebels before, but it said a lot.
Yeah, and undocumented.
He says, yeah. He says, I know you're illegal. It's a tough spot for everyone. The council needs your help or there's no harvest. The help is undocumented. The rules are clear, but the situation requires nuance. It all ends up on me. He's such scum. And he says, the whole, I know you're illegal. I mean, this is very real world reflection.
Yeah.
And I think it is very much on purpose.
Yeah.
That's really all I had to say about that, is that there is a lot of terminology that I think that was very purposefully used. So
I agree. All right. I feel like we're kind of coming to the end of our conversation here, but what do we think the point of this first arc was?
Oh, that's a good question. What is your answer to that question?
I think it was kind of one, it was catching up where everyone was a year later, like physically, Dedra and Cyril are together, but seeing how Cassian is more entrenched in the rebellion, he's doing things, but he has a base with Bix and Brasso and Will and B2, but they're undocumented here on this planet, undocumented workers on this planet. And I think it was about showing what the Empire, where it's going in this moment, right? That it's doing these census survey checks on this planet, that they've already started what will become the Gorman Massacre, that we're coming into that story once it's already begun, right? So there's things that have been happening off screen. We know that Dedra is still looking for access, or wants to be at least, and that Mon is, going through with this wedding for Leda. I think the point of this arc, I think we kind of talked about it with Dedra, of this juxtaposition of the everyday with these crazy, horrific world events in some ways.
Yeah.
Maybe not like on the news quite yet in the galaxy, but the fact that, it's a wedding, it's this big social event, but Mon Mothma is talking about how Take Home is about to be assassinated, and they're talking about the rebellion. And then Dedra is talking about the Gorman Massacre, and then meeting her boyfriend's mother for the first time. And Bix and Brasso and Will are trying to figure out how to not get caught, but then they're having like this community dinner with everyone in that area. And like, to me, it seemed like having a moment of joy there as well. So I'm not sure if that really answered the question that I myself asked, but
I think this arc, I think you're spot on. If I could sum it up, I would say that this arc is supposed to introduce us to the fact that things are really heating up, that things are in place, that the stakes are extremely high, perhaps never been higher, and that is only going to raise. I mean, we end this arc with this feeling of dread.
I would say of like losing control too.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that we're just at the beginning of our story. If we want to view season 2 as, a regular arc of moving towards, a climax and a falling action and things like that, I feel like we're rising.
Yeah.
And I think that's the purpose.
Yeah, I agree. We're still rising. Yeah.
Great episodes though. I think Star Wars changing episodes in a lot of ways. I feel like Andor has broken the mold in so many ways, and I do feel like Star Wars needed this series as a whole. And I truly still stand by the fact that I don't think there's a better show on television right now that shows the impact of tyranny in real time like Andor does. I think that you could argue potentially maybe Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
But I really do feel like and how lucky are we that we have such prestige television in our space franchise? It is so fantastic. And I am looking forward to this every week.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, a great kickoff to Andor, and I can't believe we're back.
We're back, baby.
With season 2. And when you're listening to this, we will be in Japan currently. We'll be post Star Wars Celebration. I can't even think of what the day is, let alone what the day will be in the future when you're listening to this. But we'll be after Star Wars Celebration in Japan. So hopefully you followed along with us on our...
We'll probably have a lot of content.
With our journey in Japan. We'll still be there actually for a few more days. So you can tell us what you thought of this first arc of Andor season 2. I got to say though, the only bad part about screeners, we said this before, is we don't get episode titles on screeners. And Charlotte and I love to talk about episode titles. So unfortunately, we'll have to cover that at a future date. But you will have to tell us what you think of this first arc of Andor. We would love to hear. You can find us on Twitter /X at SkyTalkersPod or our personal handles. Mine is at Caitlin Plesher and Charlotte's is at Clarity. If you're looking to see what we've been up to in Japan, please head on over to our Instagram and our TikTok. Just search Skytalkers. You can find us there. You can also head on over to our website, skytalkers.com, or email us hello@skytalkers.com. And if you have a couple seconds and would like to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we would so appreciate it as it helps other people find our show. You can also screenshot that you're listening to the show in real time and share it, tag us on your social media of choice, and we would love to repost that as well. And if you're interested in other ways to support our show and how to get involved in our wonderful Discord community, which is probably very active right now, talking about the latest Andor episode.
No question.
You can head on over to our Patreon and check out our reward tiers there, which include Discord access at every level.
I want to say a huge thank you to these patrons: Sophie, Jacqueline, Catherine, B, Kyle, Ella, Kels, Jennifer, Tom, Sarah, Savannah, Allie, Neil, Blessed Cheesemaker, Travis, Adam, Lady Valkyrie, Megan, and The Morning's Hush. Thank you so much for supporting us.
Yes, thank you guys so much. And until next time, may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.
This has been a 58 Ember production. For more shows, please visit the 58 Ember channel, 58ember.com, or find us at 58 Ember Media on socials.